So let's go right back then, so which is perhaps part of this film or a separate film. What brought you to Harlow in the first place?
When we got married in 1955, we spent, like a lot of young couples, a long while looking for somewhere to live. We spent a whole week touring London trying to find somewhere to live.
And you were living where at that time? Where were you born and brought up?
I was born in London, in Haringey, but I didn't know this, but I was moved out when I was a year old to Dagenham, and so I was brought up. I always say Dagenham's my hometown, hence my recent publication of memoirs of growing up in Dagenham.
So 1955, you're looking for somewhere to live. What happens next?
Well, we obviously applied to Dagenham Council when we were thinking of getting married, and they said, yes, that's fine, you can go on the waiting list. It's about 20 years at the moment. So we had some further thoughts, and my older brother Alan had arrived in Harlow in 1955, March, and opened the Stowe Library. So I was a frequent visitor to Harlow, very impressed with the town and determined to try and get a job. So I kept applying for jobs, applied to the Development Corporation for housing vacancies, and in May the following year, 1956, I was accepted by Cliff Jackman to become one of his staff as a housing assistant.
So where did you first live?
We first lived at Northbrooks. When I was interviewed by Cliff Jackman, he said, well, of course, as you're just husband and wife, no children, the corporation can only give you a flat. So I said, that's fine, because my brother had a flat in Hare Street Springs, and a very nice flat. So we were quite happy with that. And then when I started work on, I think the following Monday, or very quickly after that, Cliff phoned me up and said, look, he said, I spoke to you about the flat. He said, I've got another proposition for you. He said, Powell and Moyer are just finishing some houses at Northbrooks, flat tops, and they're experimental. And we need somebody to go in and do a living in report, because the corporation always had reports on every type of house that was built by various people. He said, would you like a 2-bedroom house and do a report for me? So we jumped at the opportunity.
And where was that?
162 Northbrooks, in the flat top, as they called the Powell and Moyer houses. And there were various drawbacks in the house, in the design, but believe the cost from memory was £1,800, and I think at that time the corporation were paying about £1,950 for a 2-bedroom house. It was somewhat cheaper.
And can you actually remember moving in, or those first weeks?
Yes, moving in the last day of June, or the first day of last day of May, or whatever, with what little furniture we had. Then going off to Finsbury Park to order some furniture from the local furniture shop, and everybody was on HP, high purchase in those days. Nobody had cash to buy furniture.
Did it feel like hard times?
They were enjoyable times, and it was a lovely house, and I did the necessary in making the comments and living there, and there were a number of things that needed drawing to attention. And I can tell you a little anecdote that follows. The proposals for the M25 were going through Bell Common on surface level, which would have gone straight through the Epping cricket ground. And there was a campaign to get a tunnel, and some of us in Harlow joined the campaign, the Epping campaign, to get a tunnel. And we had a couple of marches in Whitehall, etc. And one evening I was asked to go and meet the Epping committee, which I agreed to do, and we went down to this house in the Lee Valley, and it was on top of a hill, and it was a converted farmhouse. And I can remember one side of the farmhouse was total glass window, and looked out over the Lee Valley. And I said, what a magnificent view, I said to the owner. And he introduced himself, and he said, oh, I'm Mr. Moyer. He said, I've done some work in Harlow, do you know anything about it? So we sat down, and I explained to him the possible defects in 162 Northbrooks and the design, and he said, "That's very interesting, Ron." He said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll crawl under the table for the rest of the evening."
And
It was nice. A user met the architect, and then of course when I was working with the corporation, we had a scheme whereby evening visits. We used to visit people in new houses, new tenancies, and sit down with them and say what's good and bad about this house, and then every housing area we would then do a report back to the architects as to the occupiers' opinions, which I think was a very good scheme.
And your neighbours, did you know your neighbours, and was there a sense of community there in Northbrooks?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
And happy times.
There's a young man who was, I think, 7 years old, was going to Hare Street Junior School and lived on the other side of the road to us. I say he was about 7 years old, this is, say, 1957. And he said one day he was pulling at the branches of a little tree along Northbrooks that no doubt the corporation had planted. And I went over to him and said, "Don't do that, you'll damage that tree, you know, this is part of the landscape, etc." And so I said, "Okay." And he stopped doing it. That gentleman, I've known for many years, is our window cleaner now. And he often relates this to me. He said, "Of course we met when I was 7. In 1957. He's a lovely man, and when he comes to do the windows, we always have a little chat about past times. But
do you know if anybody in your community there in Northbrooks is still around, or do you think most people may have, or do you respect, may have passed on?
I think most of the people. Jock Arnott, of course, lived in Northbrooks, and we were very close in the Labour Party because he was Labour Party agent to Stan Newens for many years. So Jock and I worked very closely together on elections, canvassing programmes, writing leaflets, arranging public meetings, and just opposite him was Les Atkins. And before Jock became paid agent to Stan, Les was voluntary agent to Stan Newens, and I got on very well with Les, and we worked together on lots of things over the years. And then, I don't know if you know the story, but Les wanted to be chair of the council, basically. And after each election is an annual meeting of all the political groups. So the Labour group always met on a Sunday morning, and Les was confident that he was going to be made vice chairman. And the vote went against him, he wasn't made vice chairman. So he walked out of the meeting and resigned from the Labour Party, and then stood in subsequent years in Hare Street as independent Labour, and then Liberal, then independent Tory, and then Tory, and later he became president of the Harlow Conservative Association.
Well, it's nice to travel, wasn't it, politically?
Yes. I think I was the only possibly the only member of the Labour Party who stayed a close friend of Les, because you've got to see across politics. If people change their mind, they change their mind.
Mm.
You know, it didn't really change our relationship. I suppose it must have done in some ways. The sad thing to me was Les's funeral at Parnham Wood. I think I was the only Labour Party member there, and all the years he served on the council, I tried to get the council to be represented, but I didn't succeed, and I think it's too harsh. Yeah, we're all human beings, and if we change our views, well, we change our views, and I try and stick to mine, but you know, who knows?
But looking back, and the theme of our series of films, there's between 70 and 100 films, and the film is Why They Came Here. You're pleased you came here?
Oh, delighted. I think it's part of the post-war experiment, and I think it's been very successful. I think it's made a lot of people happy. I've said in my Coming to Harlow memoirs with the corporation how every Thursday morning we give people the keys to the houses, new houses, and people often cried because they were getting their first home, and getting family home, and all sorts of compliments and things we used to get. And working for the corporation was very good. It was very satisfying socially for me. You know, that we were housing people. And today, housing problem. Why is it a housing problem? Because councils were not allowed to build. We've not developed any new towns. Is what we want is new towns to, in my view, to solve the national housing crisis. It's no good having £500,000 blocks of flats in London. They're no good for families. We want new towns with houses and gardens.
Well, Ron, Bill, thank you very much for your time.